Hello, welcome to the presentation on surviving disruption, or what I like to call mini prepping 101. My name is Dr. Dean Kazoleas. I teach public relations and I consult in public relations, mainly in the issues of communications and issue and crisis management. Now, when we start this presentation, I want to ask you a simple question. Were you prepared? Were you prepared for this pandemic? What if I told you that, that I was? Now, I could make up some story that basically I used some computer models, or I could tell you that I had some type of crystal ball and I was able to predict the future. But the reality is none of that is true. Nobody predicted this type of pandemic. Nobody did. No one saw it coming. But I will tell you this much. I didn't lie when I said I was prepared. The idea is that working in the field of issue and crisis management, I realized that individuals, especially living in places like California, where we're prone to storms and earthquakes, need to be prepared for events. Events that might not bring about destruction, but rather bring about disruption. This presentation is basically going to teach you some of the basics of mini prepping 101. Again, the idea here is not to prepare for destruction. Rather, it's to prepare for disruption. It goes back to organizations. The idea is when we work with organizations and we want to do issue and crisis management, we always start saying, where are we vulnerable? Where is my client? Where is my client vulnerable? We look on the horizon and say, what's coming? What can we do? Now, an important distinction I want to make here at the very beginning of this video. And I'm going to be talking more about the idea of issue management as opposed to crisis management. Now, here's the difference. Issues or problems or factors, things that you see coming off in the distance. They may affect you, they may disrupt you. They may not destroy you, but they can still disrupt your ability to either lead your life or to basically be able to pursue your business. Crisis management, of course, is when you lose control of events. You no longer control the timetable. You might not have key resources. The idea is that we want to detect issues out on the horizon, and then we want to act if we can to keep the issue or the problem from becoming a crisis. The analogy is this. It's like crossing a street. Crisis management is the point where you say, you know what, I'm going to walk across the street, and if I get hit, well, I've got good health insurance, or I've got an ambulance ready. Issue management, you take a second, you look both ways, you make sure nothing is coming. Now, if you're crossing the street, you see something coming, you start moving faster. That's effective issue management. Now, what we're going to be talking about in this presentation is how to apply those same principles, in this case of issue management and preparation, to your daily lives in the idea of mini prepping 101. Now, last thing I'll mention here, there is going to be a plug at the end of this video. That plug is for the course I teach. And in crisis communications, it's crisis management. It's COM 469. And I'm going to be giving you the same advice today in this video that I've been giving students in this class, in my graduate courses, and my professional clients on basically how to prepare for disruption and to some extent be a little prepared for destruction. I want to go back to that question I asked you at the opening of the video. Were you prepared for this pandemic? Were you prepared when the governor issued the order that we're all supposed to shelter in place? Were you prepared? Or were you one of those people that had to dash to the store and fight for supplies, fight for water, fight for food, or fight for toilet paper? Now, here's my second question. If you weren't prepared, why weren't you? Now, it would be different if we were living in a different part of the United States or a different part of the world where, for example, we didn't live by a coast and we didn't live on a big active earthquake fault. The idea is that in Southern California, we know that we deal with certain types of disasters on a regular basis. Those are storms and those are earthquakes. Actually, they predict the big one is coming. Now, even for us here in Orange County, it might not be that big. But you know what? It's still going to be disruptive. The idea is that power may be out. The idea is that the highways are going to be impassable. All it takes is 1, 2, 3 overpasses to all of a sudden have cracks, and the 5, the 405, the 110, those are shut down. So the idea I'm going to give you in this video is that you need to prepare for such disasters. Again, this is good issue management, issue monitoring. The idea is we see this as a potential issue for us that live here in California, and what we're going to be doing is preparing for it. Now, I'm going to focus on basically 3 or 4 key areas in my presentation on mini prepping 101. I'm going to talk about basic food and supplies. I'm going to talk about simple lighting and communications. I'm going to talk about first aid kit and first aid preparedness. And last but not least, the idea of having a bug out list just in case you basically are going to have to leave your home. I'm going to cover all of these, and at the end, I'll provide a summary of why you should be doing this if you weren't doing it before. And of course, as promised, I'll also make a short plug for my class, COM 469, Crisis Management and Crisis Communications. Before we get into this presentation, I want to make one thing very, very clear. What I've coached my clients, students, and even prep for myself is not about surviving destruction. This presentation is not about surviving the zombie apocalypse. It's not basically about surviving the comet strike or the asteroid strike. It's not basically surviving global thermonuclear war. Rather, what this presentation is about surviving disruption. I'm talking about the idea of there's a big storm that causes disruption. There's an earthquake that causes disruption. Or in this case, like we're living through coronavirus, basically it's a pandemic that causes disruption. The idea is that services will be disrupted. Food supplies may be disrupted, but you'll be prepared for that disruption. Some of you may be thinking, well, I might have enough food, or I might have enough water, or I'm going to be okay. But the problem becomes is, what if you don't? What if you need that water? What if you need that toilet paper? You have to understand that when disruption occurs, panic comes with it. Think back a few weeks to the panic buying that came at the start of the pandemic. Instantly, people were all stressed. They were all in panic mode, filling shopping carts, grabbing what they could, and fights broke out in grocery stores across the U.S. The idea is, if you're prepared, you won't have to deal with it. When the pandemic first hit, you may have been surprised when, bam, all of a sudden, the grocery store shelves, they were empty. Gone was the water, gone was the food, and for many people, the big surprise was gone was the toilet paper. Now, I wasn't surprised, and experts weren't surprised either. When you look at surveys from people around the world who survived natural disasters or large-scale civil war where there's a lack of resources, they talk about what things are most important. What are the most barterable? What are the most desirable? Number one at the top of the list is toilet paper. The idea is that when you're doing mini prepping, you want to think about things like bottled water, or you want to think about having a little bit of extra toilet paper. It's going to be good for you to have that you don't have to fight for those resources, but it's also going to be there for you if you need to barter. Now, last but not least, you have to always weigh this. In the case of the current pandemic we're living through, water's not important. Our faucets still work. But in certain types of crises, like a big storm or an earthquake, water may be more important, which is why I always stress that everybody have at least one extra case of water on hand. If you're watching this presentation, the chances are that you're a student. Many times over the years, my students say, Dr. K, I don't know where to start. I'm a student. I live in an apartment, or I live at home with my parents. I don't have a lot of room. I don't have a lot of money. I can't possibly become one of those preppers. Well, the reality is you don't have to. Again, we're not preparing for destruction. We're preparing for disruption. And it's really easy to start. And this is a simple little rule that I developed a number of years ago. Where do you start? I want you to think of the words +1. Just think +1. The idea is this. The next time you go to the grocery store, when you go to the store and you start shopping for your groceries for the week, just buy one more of each dry good or perishable good, or 1 week supply more of each item than you normally do. What you want to do here is important. The first one is you buy the foods you normally eat and use. Really, if you want to do mini prepping, you don't need to stock up on those emergency foods. Rather, it's smart just to get food that you're going to eat and learn to rotate. We're also talking about canned food, dry goods, non-perishable items, things that if you do +1 a couple of times now aren't going to basically go bad in a couple of weeks. Now, this is also going to put things like toilet paper, water, and really important to drink such as milk, as long as it'll last, juice or soda. Focusing more on things like water, juice, and soda. The idea is if something happens, you'll have at least 1 week or even 2 that you're not going to have to worry. So you've got a bunch of the foods that you normally eat. Now, in mini prepping, another tip. All foods aren't created equal. What we often want to do is pick foods that basically either have a lot of carbohydrates or have a nice balance of carbohydrates, fats, and protein. Foods that will keep for quite a long time and are inexpensive. The 2 examples I'd like to give are a 5-pound bag of rice. That bag of rice, 5 pounds at Ralph's or Kroger, basically normally sells for $2.50. But that bag will give you 50 servings of food and 160 calories a serving. That's a 40-ounce jar of peanut butter. Normally runs between $5 and $6 at a place like Walmart or Target. But that 140-ounce jar of peanut butter will give you 35 servings at 190 calories per serving. And it's going to be loaded with fats, carbohydrates, and proteins. The idea is that in mini prepping, all foods aren't created equal. And by picking a few select foods like a bag of 5-pound rice, maybe a 4 to 5 pound bag of dried beans or a jar of peanut butter, you can really add quite a bit of staying power to your food supply. To help you get started, I've created a short list of some inexpensive and simple survival foods. So what I'm saying is you don't have to rush out to the site basically where they're going to charge you $2 and $3 and $4 for that expensive MRE or meal ready to eat. Rather, think about buying one 5-pound bag of rice, buy one large container of oatmeal, buy a big bag of basically pinto beans, a large jar of peanut butter, a couple of cans of tuna or canned chicken. Canned chili has got a lot of carbohydrates, fat, and protein, and usually runs about $1 a can. Maybe have some extra nuts, walnuts, peanuts, almonds on hand, or dried fruits like raisins. The idea is all of these foods will last a year, 2 years in your cupboards, and are inexpensive, and basically give you a 1 to 2 week food supply very quickly and very inexpensively. If you do any research on, for example, being a prepper or even a mini prepper, what you're going to find is a lot of people are suggesting things for meals like these things called MREs or meals ready to eat that basically come out of the military. Now, they're not bad. Don't get me wrong. They last up to 10 years. They're portable. You can take them with you. They've got carbs, proteins, and fats, but they're expensive. Basically, an entree for 100 to maybe 120 to 300 calories is $3 to $5 per entree. You know, if you want to be a mini prepper, stick to the stuff you like to eat that you can get in the grocery store. It's a lot less expensive. You know, some of my favorites, for example, are canned chili. Canned chili typically has 250 to 400 calories a can, and there's 2 servings of that, and it runs from anywhere from like $1.20 to about $1.80. Or how about this one? Chef Boyardee, beef ravioli, or canned lasagna, or spaghetti with meatballs. Again, each of those cans, typically under $1 can at Walmart, has anywhere from 200 to 400 calories a serving. So the idea is that there's cheap, alternative mini prepper foods that are out there that you can stock your cupboard with. You spend $5-10, you've got a decent supply. A reality living in modern society is that we have a dependence on electricity. Our problem, especially living in California, is that in the event of a large storm or an earthquake, we may not have power for 1 day, 2 days, 1 week, or even 2 to 3 weeks. So during this time, you might start thinking about the things you're going to need. You're going to need lighting in your home, power for small electronics, and some communication device that's beyond yourself. In other words, a way that you can hear, for example, governmental warnings, especially if the cell towers are disrupted. A couple of quick, simple things that you can have in your home. One is an emergency radio and phone charger that's combined. You can have one of these in your house and one of these in your cars. The devices I show on this page, for example, are running anywhere from $10 to about $30, $40. These also usually include lights. It's also smart to have a small solar charger to be able to charge things like, for example, a cell phone. You pop one of these out in your backyard or on your patio. The next thing you know, in a few hours, your cell phone is back to 100%. Now, last but not least, you're also going to need lighting. A couple different ways to do this. One of the things, a simple way, is an LED lantern. Now, notice here, I didn't just say like electronic lantern or flashlight. I said LED. The difference is an LED lantern or an LED flashlight will run normally 5 to 10 times as long on batteries or charge as a normal light will. So the idea is if you buy one of these or you want to have one of these in your home or your car, you want to make sure it's LED. Now, I told you in the beginning that I was going to share some personal tips and tricks, and this is one of them. These inflatable solar lanterns made by a company called Lucy. Now, full retail on these is about $12 each. The idea is that if you put this in the sunlight for 8 hours, it will give you 12 to 15 hours of light. Now, what that means is that if I get them on sale for, let's say, $10, $12, I can buy 2 or 3 of these very, very inexpensively. Then all of a sudden, I have a way that I can basically provide lighting for myself for weeks, if not months at a time, by simply charging these during the day and then using them at night. No, we've talked about food and supplies, and we've talked about some basic lighting and ability to communicate, or at least get information. But there's a third thing that I'm going to recommend, and that's having a first aid kit and first aid preparedness. Now stop for a second. Notice, I didn't stop at the word first aid kit. I said first aid preparedness. What I'm suggesting is basically that you take a first aid course. Maybe you just look online and read a short or watch a short video on first aid. The idea is that you need to be prepared. So first and foremost, have a first aid kit. Make sure you've got a larger one in your home. Carry a small one in your car. You'll be surprised the number of times in your life you may need one when you have to help yourself or help somebody else. But second, know and learn first aid. Now, I've got something that may come as a surprise for you. The idea is that emergency medical services may not be available to help. Now, I'm going to repeat that. emergency medical services may not be available to help. Now, what I'm saying is that in a lot of the disasters that they look at for Southern California, for example, very large storms or that big earthquake, not even really the big one, but a sizable earthquake, freeways may be impassable. Basically, overpasses will crumble. What you're going to have is you're going to have an EMS system that's basically overwhelmed. What that's going to mean for you is that you're going to be on your own for 48 to 72 hours. If you're running down the steps of your apartment building, or you're running and you fall and you hurt your arm, you hurt your leg, you're on your own. What I'm saying is that at that point in time, if you have a first aid kit and some basic knowledge of first aid, you're going to be able to help you or be able to help those around you. When I mention something like a bug-out list or a bug-out kit, people start thinking, uh-oh, there goes crazy Dr. K again. He's talking about being a prepper. No, what I'm talking about is being smart, especially if you live in California. The idea is this, that you might have to leave your home very suddenly. Now again, this isn't about the zombie apocalypse. This isn't about nuclear war. Rather, it's about living in California. In the event, for example, of a large fire, like we had in the past several years. In the event of a landslide, or even in the event of an earthquake where your home might be damaged, you may have to leave very quickly. Quick story. Had a friend who was living through the fires up in Santa Barbara and Montecito. What happens is, knock comes on the door. It was the fire department. Fire department says you have 20 to 30 minutes to evacuate. Now, he had an RV there. He had collected motorcycles, put a few on this rack in the front, grabbed what he could in that 20, 30 minutes, thinking, you know what, I'll be back in a few hours, if not a day. Guess what? When he went back, everything had burned to the ground. Nothing was left but ashes. So the idea is, in that 20, 30 minutes that you're going to start panicking, have a list that basically tells you what you need to grab in order of priority and what can't be replaced. At the beginning of this presentation, I asked you, are you prepared? Well, we've talked about Mini Prepping 101, the idea of getting you prepared in your home to be able to survive 2 to 4 weeks. But what happens if you're not at home? What happens if you're at work or you're at school? An example here. Basically in California, they say when we get hit with the big one, what's going to happen is that a lot of the roads, a lot of the highways are going to be closed. There's a very good chance that you might have to walk home. So what the experts recommend is that you have a survival backpack in your car. A backpack with a little bit of food, a little bit of water, some flashlight, comfortable shoes. For example, ladies, are you wearing those heels or you're wearing dress shoes? Gentlemen, again, you're wearing dress shoes. You may have to walk 10, 15 miles to be able to get home. Do you have a blanket in your car in case you're cold? Experts also just having rope or duct tape because you could use it. You could use it to fashion shelter or for other things. And last but not least, think about having a knife in case that you've got to cut that rope or you need it for self-defense. The idea is that you need to be prepared not just at home, but in your car. I hope you've enjoyed this presentation. At this point in time, now I've given you the basics of basically being prepared for disruption. Now you're going to be prepared for that pandemic. Now you're going to be prepared for the aftermath and disruption of something like an earthquake or maybe a large storm. The idea is at this point, now you've got some extra food and supplies. You've got basic lighting and communications. You've got that first aid kit and hopefully some first aid preparedness. You've got that bug out list. You've got that kit in your car. You know what the good news is? You're not going to have to go out and fight crowds or risk your life or your safety basically to get supplies when there's a shortage of them. Last but not least, I want to make a really important point. Now you're prepared. In other words, how can you help your organization if you're not basically able to take care of yourself? Because you're prepared, now you and your family are taken care of. Now you can devote your time and your focus to your organization in this time of crisis. Think about it again. How can you help your organization if you're having to focus on just taking care of yourself? So if you become a mini prepper, you're prepared. Now you basically cleared the way so that you can focus on your organization and give them the time that they need in the time of crisis. If you enjoyed learning about the concepts that we've presented in this presentation, think about taking COM 469, Crisis Communication and Crisis Management. The idea is this: if you want to be a public relations professional in this day and age, you've got to be ready to handle a crisis. I know that you're thinking for a second, hey, that's not what I want to do. Maybe I want to just do media relations. But the reality check here is that when something bad happens, they're going to look around the room and say, oh, you're the one, you do PR, you handle this. What I'm saying is today that the expectation is that the public relations professional is going to be able to do things like manage a crisis. Now, what we learn in this class is first how to conduct that risk and vulnerability analysis for any organization, whether you're a company that makes products, whether you're a nonprofit, whether you're an educational institution. The idea is learn how to analyze the environment, identify which issues may cause problems, and then you prepare for them. You learn how to build a professional level crisis plan. And it's not often dealing with one type of crisis, but often the most 3 to 5 likely crises that the organization is going to handle. Now, last but not least, what we also do is learn strategy. We study a lot of different strategies that have been used across time, whether it's 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, or even this year. The idea is that we look to see what other PR professionals used. We see what worked, what didn't, and then we learn how to do that with our clients. So again, if you're interested, come 469 Crisis Communications. It's taught during the regular year and in the summer.